Hello everybody, I'm Katalin Galambos, Senior Product Marketing Manager at NNG, and I will be your host for this session. Today we are going to talk about a very complex and controversial topic, the new regulation on the ban of new IC vehicle sales in the European Union by 2035. Why is this ban so controversial? Let's see some aspects. And today we are joined by Ferenc Pataki, Solution Manager, and Jacint Tordai, Strategic Product Manager. Thanks, Mephi and Jacint, for taking your time and for having accepted my invitation.
Thanks. Thank you for the invitation.
Press has been loud about this ban in the past few weeks. The member states, the Parliament, the Commission took months of negotiations to finally reach an agreement on this topic, the ban, which finally, in the final step, was thwarted. So why is this topic so controversial? Could you please name a few aspects, Mephi?
Yes, so there are many aspects to it, political, economical, and environmental.
Okay, let's start with the environmental aspects. Aren't EVs obviously more sustainable than internal combustion engine vehicles?
Yes, I think so. So in the long run, we will run out of fossil fuels anyway, so sooner or later, even if it turned out recently that we have more reserves than we thought, say, 10 years ago, but we will eventually run out of them. So EVs are a solution to this because at the same time, the renewable energy production is improving pretty quickly. So the European Union also pushing for that, and that makes EVs more sustainable in the long run.
And by the way, what will happen to the batteries? Have you seen these pictures circulating on the internet showing battery cemeteries?
Yes, we have seen it. First of all, we can expect that batteries would have a second life. So after the capacity of the batteries in the electric cars decreases with time. So after a number of years, it's still contested but how long is the lifetime of the batteries? 7 to 10 years. They are not good enough for electric cars, but they are still good enough for energy storage with a smaller capacity. And they might be a very good solution for people who already have solar panels on their roof, and they can store the surplus energy production during the daytime and store it and reuse for the nighttime. Eventually, if they cannot charge their cars during the daytime when the sun shines, they can store the energy in these batteries and then during night charge the cars. That's one thing. The second life, and then recycling. Obviously, as of today, we do not have the recycling technology at industrial scale because there was no such demand. But as the EV fleet, the first mass production generation of the EV fleet reached their end of life, I expect that these technologies will develop at a very high speed. Obviously, it's a challenge. There will be tensions. We will see more pictures like this. But eventually, I pretty much hope that we will be able to solve this problem.
By the way, you mentioned here tension and mass production. Will the grid be able to handle such load if everyone wants to charge its car at the same time?
That's a good question because this is indeed really, really challenging. So it's not that easy as it sounds that we would have the renewable energy and then that's it. Because storing electricity is an issue. It's a challenge, and batteries are expensive. So actually, the EVs might help us in this sense in the future. EVs, the charging process can already be started remotely as of today. We can expect that in the future we will indeed use this opportunity, and potentially the electrical companies will be able to set the prices in such a way that's an incentive for the owners of the cars to start the charging process when there is a surplus energy in the grid. Because
how I don't really understand. How can EVs help the grid, the whole network, by giving back the surplus?
That's the second thing. But the first thing is that due to the renewables, when the sun shines and the wind blows, there is a surplus. And it's an issue. What do we do with this extra energy? So then what we can do is that start charging the batteries at that time. So the EV fleet might help to even out the fluctuation in the renewable energy production. And on the other hand, during nighttime, when there isn't enough, a sufficient amount of renewable energy, then the EVs can support the grid. This technology is still in infancy. So like the current European standard, the CCS2 connector does not support it, but the standardization is already underway that will help to enable the EVs to help out the grid when there is a need. But still, it's true that there are challenges here as well. So obviously, we would need to increase the capacity of the electrical grid as well.
By the way, is there any example worldwide for the trial of this technology, whether this is working or not? Have you heard about any example?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
But it sounds promising.
But it's doable. So actually, it's so the problem is not pressing enough. But as soon as we encounter real problems, and then the companies, so there is legislation is also necessary for this, because the electricity prices are not free prices. So legislation also has a word in the electricity pricing. But as soon as we open up the opportunity for fluctuating prices, then the car owners immediately will make use of it and will charge the batteries when electricity is cheap. And the electricity will be cheap when there is a surplus of energy due to renewables.
Yeah, and regarding pricing, let me also add that it's also an issue for the other part of this agreement in the EU with the e-fuels, because there right now what we see that the price of a e-gasoline or diesel could reach even being the double of the current traditional gasoline or diesel. So it's also a pricing issue on the other side, not on the electricity side, but on the e-fuel side.
Mm-hmm. My other question comes to the raw materials. Jacint, are there enough raw materials to meet this demand of battery production?
Yeah, I think this is a very heavily debated question. The problem space is very complex here, and there are more pessimistic and more optimistic views here. What we see that in case of key minerals, for example, the lithium or the copper, or be that the nickel or cobalt or graphite, there are serious concerns when it comes to supply versus demand. So, for example, in case of lithium, the 2022 supply versus the projected 2035 demand is kind of a 6x multiplier. So it also goes for natural graphite, for example. In the other cases, we see 2 to 3 x multipliers in this kind of balance. So serious challenges. Also the copper is expected to have a 2-digit gap in the next over the next decade. So very, very challenging. That's why the OEMs started a few years ago already, but now much more intensively to contract directly the mining associations and mining companies, because this will be key when it comes to selling cars at scale. At that time, when these regulations will get in actual legislation, and they will be forced actually.
So raw materials are really key strategical elements of this
Exactly.
change. Yes.
And let me add that this is again so controversial because we are for EVs because they are greener, but for EVs we need this raw material. For that we need to open new mines, and opening new mines is not very fashionable in the environmental protection circles. So even though my view is that we have sufficient raw material, but opening new mines, that's very controversial.
Yeah, and there are some more optimistic views that some of these minerals could be replaced with this or that, some synthetic stuff or something like this. But it's really kind of hypothetical, not yet validated. So,
I mean, cobalt used to be the most critical recently, and it seems that they more or less managed to not fully, but mostly substitute cobalt, but lithium cannot be substituted. So there is no way around it. Lithium, it's no replacement for lithium.
It will be a challenge for the next decade.
So it seems that we are facing a very challenging period, and the OEMs as well. How will this regulation and this ban affect the OEMs? Do you have any projection on that?
Actually, it's it's not coming. I mean, the ban, it's not coming the right time, because OEMs and the whole automotive industry is now facing very tough years. There's a huge transformation because more and more drivers are socialized with the application ecosystems and all the digital experiences on their phones. So it brings in a lot of headache to the OEMs, how they can convince and persuade the potential new customers, I mean the drivers, and also the post-COVID effects, the economical effects, the chip shortage, so a lot of things. And now this EU ban is also something that they should really strategically consider, be that a workforce aspect, or be that a internal training aspect, because electromobility has its own domains. So those who are working in the factories, those who are working on the design, on the implementation, those should be very familiar with some basic concepts. So what we see that the more sensitive aspect is the driving experience aspect, because with electromobility, the range anxiety just enters the cabin. So what we see that right now only very few car manufacturers managed to mitigate this range anxiety. And even though we have dozens of battery electric models out there, those are not really providing with a good driving experience, to be honest, because the range anxiety is there. And even if one can search for charging stations for a longer route, it will be really pressing and stressing that the driver cannot really plan what will happen during that route. So, for example, for families or I don't know, more personas with taking longer trips, it is really a challenge, and actually it is blocking the actual purchasing thinking when it comes to range anxiety. So driving experience is definitely something that is challenging the OEMs.
Yeah, but I know that this is improving pretty quickly. So a few years ago, when we developed our first navigation for electric vehicles, and already that was 7 years ago or so. So we had EV support features helping the drivers to plan long journeys. At that time, it was really challenging because the number of charging stations along the major road network was pretty low, and actually there were long routes that were just not non-feasible. So we had to adjust the route planning to the charging network, and this is changing pretty quickly. So as of today, this is less and less of a problem. It's still a problem for cars with small batteries, but for family cars, it's doable. It's gonna be a challenge again when the number of cars increases faster than the number of charging stations, but at least we already have the charging stations, at least in the more developed parts of the world. So in Europe, it's not a problem. It's still a problem in the US.
That's what I wanted to add.
Okay.
That's for the OEMs. Another problem is with the global supply. So the global strategy. We are talking right now about Europe, and we see that North America is also something where this whole adoption of electromobility is accelerating. But there are regions all around the world where this is really just having a lower pace. I mean, the adoption itself, the building up the charging network. So, for example, in Brazil, there are more challenges of building a state-of-the-art charging network. So the adoption is much more slipped and delayed compared to these Western countries, regions.
So OEMs cannot switch from one day, I mean, not one day, from 1 year to the other, from internal combustion to electric vehicles.
I go back one step. So I think we should tell it straight that electric cars are simpler than internal combustion engine cars. Producing them requires less labor, so there is no way around it. There would be less jobs in the automotive industry. That's it. So we need to, and the OEMs need to prepare for this. And either they kind of embrace it, or European manufacturers will lose the battle with the Chinese ones. So if they try to go around it, and if they do not face it, then they can postpone it. They can perhaps postpone the pain, but that's not going to help them in the long run.
Yeah. So it goes without saying that the Chinese OEMs are leading this space. This market.
Are there new players emerging, or will be emerging new players? What is your projection forecast on this?
So actually, there are a number that are new for us, but not so new in China, and they are entering. And actually, we are helping them.
And we are leveraging on this strategy. So the Chinese export is growing extremely, which means that the Chinese OEMs are entering the European market. So we see more and more Chinese OEMs, well-established OEMs, just popping up as a kind of startup with different brands in the EV space. And I to be honest, these are very have very state-of-the-art technology, not just when it comes to the actual vehicle, the chassis, but really the software as well. So all the trendy technologies, all the over-the-air technologies, the user experience, what I was talking about, that it should be much more smartphone-like, those are already in these Chinese cars. So it's also a challenge for the OEMs, yes.
Yeah. And so the new generation of Chinese cars, especially the EVs, have to be taken seriously. So a few years ago, we could laugh at them, oh, the Chinese, and what about the crash test, they fail. But no, it's not the case anymore. Yeah.
Brave new future. Okay, and let's switch to the individual level on our personal lives. How will this affect our lives on a daily level, in our daily routine? Do we need to train ourselves to have a different mindset with EV cars, having only EV cars?
From my side, it needs much more planning. So until this range anxiety is not solved in a seamless and how to say user-friendly way, this is going to be very planning heavy. So searching for charging stations in your car is a good thing, but when you are going I don't know, twice a year or 3 times a year for a longer trip, that really needs thorough planning, especially if you have a bigger family.
But that's where we have with our navigation software.
Yes. So
Yes, but I guess it's also a different feeling or mindset to have always the batteries filled up, because what happens if there is an emergency? And
I think we have to differentiate here. So I think for the daily routine, for people who can charge their cars at home or at work, it's an easy thing, because they just go home, plug in, and that's it. They can forget it, and they don't need to do any special planning. But this is not so for many people. This is not an opportunity. So people living in the inner city, they cannot charge their cars at home. So so for the population having the opportunity to charge at home, it's a totally different story from the rest. And actually, I expect that the proliferation of the electric vehicles will slow down when this sub-market saturates who can charge at home. It will continue, but it would require additional infrastructure development and investment, so that curbside charging or whatever everywhere would be necessary to let the life of those people as comfortable with EVs as it is with internal combustion engines today. So that's a bit longer future.
But let me also add the more financial aspect as a person. So we see a big difference between the pricing when you are charging at home and the price tags on public charging spots. So there could be, for example, in the US, it could be even 6 times more expensive if you're charging at a public charging spot compared to the cost when you're charging at home. And this is also kind of slowing down the pace of the adoption, because people are really thinking with this in mind, how much it will cost me to use the car. So it's really a challenge right now. I really hope, and I'm positive, and with this I agree with Mafi that this will be better and better, and the charging network will be more advanced. But this is also a pricing issue right now, and it's not just about the electricity, but as I referred to right now, there is not clear how much the e-fuels will cost. So there is a lot of uncertainty implied by this EU ban and this final agreement.
Okay, my last question: how does NNG and NNG's product portfolio adapt to this change? Are you ready?
Sure, we are ready now for 7 years for this. So we started our fully deeply integrated first production version navigation product development in 2017. In 2018, it went into production. So that was for a premium manufacturer. And since then, we are continuously perfecting. We have our own consumption model. We are our own approach, how we equip our routing in the cloud with EV intelligence. So all these developments are all about mitigating or even minimizing the range anxiety. So because this is the biggest challenge for OEMs when it comes to electrical mobility. But Matthew, please add your thoughts.
What is the main difference between these two models, software models? Is it the connectivity or?
As the initial word, so there are thousands of changes in the small details, but this very first version was a fundamentally offline version, and now we went for a fundamentally online connected version. We can still fall back, so if there is no connectivity, we are still operational, but now we can also consider the occupancy of the charging station, so we do not lead a driver to a charging spot if it is occupied. So that kind of differences. So small.
Also the speed, for example, of the routing process itself. So we are doing pre-processing of the charging stations in the cloud. So we are lightning fast compared to the, especially with extremely long routes, we are lightning fast compared to the fully offline or onboard routing process.
So that was
sounds very promising.
Yeah,
yes. Okay, thanks Matthew and Jacint. It was very nice talking to you about this topic, and I hope you also like this conversation and stay tuned for more.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.